It's something really very brief. We would like to get your insights into yesterday's sessions, maybe some experiences that you would like to share. It's part of the video that we are taking, and we'll continuously share it for information sharing, but also education within and outside Uganda and within the Resilient Africa Network.
Okay. I think when I came in yesterday, and even up to now, I still cannot remove myself from the communities that I'm familiar with. And these are communities that face such adverse situations. Specifically, like the run in Zimbabwe is about climate change, about HIV/AIDS, about orphanhood, even widowhood, against a backdrop where the environment is drastically changing in terms of limitations, limiting food production. And I keep reflecting on how so much has been done to try to help those communities. And yet it seems to me we don't seem to be getting to the answers. And so it was obvious yesterday through some of what we did that it's how we are doing it. It's really thinking outside the box in a way, coming up with a solution for that particular. I think for me, the vivid picture that I have in my head is when we had those manila sheets and those model play that we had to use and say, can you represent a solution? Trying to have the idea in my mind, but put it down in a model. For me, that was very instructive because it means translating it from an idea to something tangible. And it took me time initially to understand even what the task was about. But even as a team, yeah, we struggled with what are we supposed to do? But then it was like an eventual emerging clarity that, oh, okay, we're supposed to represent this in a model. The prototype for me, I best describe it as a model. How can I translate my idea? And we had the most, for me, I would have thought the most unusual topic to put into a prototype, like governance. How do you represent governance in a model with real, objects? So that really forced me to like really bend over in terms of trying to come out with how best do you work with what you have to come up with a solution. Probably that will be one of the most impressive things that I'll take away from the workshop. I don't know what's still to come, but that idea of having to represent something with cardboard and sticky tape and and I think that's what we need to do with the women. I just could imagine myself in a village where you have simple, and we have done part of that. Sometimes you go to a village and you want them to do some statistical counting exercise, and you work with kernels of seed, and you say, if we have this lot of seed, how many would you apportion to that? So quite frankly, we've been doing some of it, but I think it's how to bring it in this innovative context and design thinking process. I think also one of the early slides that Bernice showed yesterday was, it's about a process. It's a thinking process. It's not an event. You don't design and you go away. It's a process that involves so many players, so many possibilities. I've done brainstorming before, but also trying to think of it as the idea is really to get many possibilities. And then out of those many possibilities, what are the interlinkages from each of the individuals, so that then you can come up with your concept or idea. I think that process from moving from so many of those tic-tacs to coming up with 5, what actually do you have to do in terms of negotiating? Because as a team, we even had to negotiate that this. So I'm thinking it's a very scientific process, and yet it requires a lot of soft skills, negotiating with the other person, listening. Actually, I was working in a team this morning, I know you asked about yesterday, where I noticed one of the teammates kind of switched off because we had agreed not to zero in on his, not so much on his area, but in an area that he was not comfortable with. So it's like how that, and that's what's going to happen when you go out in the field. Their issues are not going to be animal science issues or, you know, what I'm comfortable with, but issues that relate to their realities. But how do you relate, how do you translate that into a product that they can see and be convinced in? Like when we had evaluators coming to look at our products, that could be the woman who comes and will be like, oh, but you know, you mean I can carry this on my head for 2 kilometers to fetch water? so you have to bounce it against that reality. So it's not about brilliant scientific modeling, but how do you relate it to somebody's reality? I think for me that's the challenge, which hopefully by the end of the week, you know, I'll have a lot more tools for that translation.
Thank you very much, Priska. Thank you for sharing concurrently your insights, but also the relevancy to the work and the community at large. Yeah, we thank you for that.
Thank you.
We hope that by the end of the week you have that address. And indeed, if you do not have to, then we need to let the facilitators know, and so that they can fill up that gap.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time.
You should have known I'm like, stop.